morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
I do love the smell of rain on sagebrush, the smell of new-mown hay, the aroma of mint leaves in the swamp, and even the smell of horse sweat. And I don't even mind that aroma when I'm cleaning out the calving pens. But goats? Might be different, as you'll hear from Baxter Black today.
And on the trip home to Pincher Creek, Blaine became aware of Billy's strong, some would say unpleasant odor that only disappeared when he got above 60 kilometers per hour.
Yeah, because it took place around Pincher Creek, Bax makes this one Canadian-friendly with a reference to kilometers. And the Rangeland News will look at a way to put a few more pounds on those calves just before they get weaned this fall.
See the direct result of that additional weight in the check that they receive from wherever they market their calves.
And on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear horse training file, I found something really special from, of all people, the king of the cowboys himself, Roy Rogers.
You saddle him and do everything from the left side, most people do. And if you go on the other side, you're a stranger.
And this week, my good friend and neighbor Denny Robertson shares an amazing story that was going in one direction when suddenly the lights went on for Denny, who is a great friend and a cancer survivor.
And he says something about a brand on the left hip. When I had these cancer treatments in Edmonton, they had tattooed my rear end where I was.
And another long-lost classic song of the West, and a real nice piece of cowboy poetry to round things out, but you'll want to listen closely to the story coming up after Richard Martin pours the cowboy coffee.
Morning coffee gets you on your feet. Eggs, bacon, and biscuits, raspberry jam so sweet, makes you want to get outside the day's chores gladly meet. Morning coffee gets you on your feet. Now some folks hate the morning and hate getting out of bed. They would curse the sunrise and roll over instead of getting up to meet the day with a smile upon their lips. Smell the morning coffee as it slowly drips. Morning coffee gets you on your feet. Eggs, bacon, and biscuits, raspberry jam so sweet, makes you want to get outside the day's chores gladly meet. Morning coffee gets you on your feet. Well, you might use some sweetener or add a little cream. I've heard some like it like a milkshake, even inject steam. Many things are used to make it strong or make it sweet. For me, a little shot of whiskey helps me find my feet. Sitting at the table with my hands around the mug, the food things put on the table as I take another slug. Makes me glad to be alive and living every day. That's why you see me smiling and you hear me say, morning coffee gets you on your feet. Eggs, bacon, and biscuits, raspberry jam, so sweet. Makes you want to get outside, day's chores gladly meet. Morning coffee, cowboy coffee, gets you on your feet. Morning coffee, cowboy coffee, gets you on your feet.
Denny Robertson and his family own some land not far from here where we pastured our cows in past years, and Denny has run some of his own cattle, and he kept his horse here at our place for years too. Now, Denny's an amazing guy. He's dealt with hearing difficulties for a long time, but boy, can he ever read lips, even through my mustache. And he's a cancer survivor, and of course the author of the book about his service dog of 18 years, Crackers, and I did the narration, actually, for that audiobook version. So anyway, when I heard this story, I said, Denny, you've got to come up here and share it with our listeners. So here we go. Just go back to the start, like you got this phone call?
Right. It was a couple of months ago, and we got home, and there was a flashing light on the telephone answering machine. So we answer it, and gosh, we picked up most of it, and the fella spoke quite quickly, and friendly voice, and he says something to the effect of, it's quite important that I get a hold of you, and you can phone me back at any time, and gives us a number, and something about Alberta. It was a reference to Alberta and health. And further along the conversation, just near the end, it's because we need to discuss this tuberculosis. And whoa, I sat there for a moment. I talked to my wife and I said, this is very confusing. First of all, I'd been to Edmonton a few years prior for some cancer treatments, and it was done for treatments and as a study. So there was reports going back and forth, but I hadn't participated in that for a while. Then another one, there was a case where I had some other cancers, which we treated with a tuberculosis virus. And that works in the bladder, and it's kind of involved, and it's a very neat system and very successful for me. So I was quite pumped up on it. Well, sure, I'll phone the fella. And he said any time.
And so what was that call really about? You'll find out when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Now, welcome back to the Spirit of the West. So, Denny Robertson, a cancer survivor who had some very important treatments at the Cross Cancer Clinic in Edmonton and some experimental treatments using a tuberculosis virus, got this phone message from Alberta, and with some apprehension, he called the number back.
So I was quite pumped up on it. Well, sure, I'll phone the fella. And he said any time. So it's about 6:30 at night. Pick up the phone, and I phone him back. And, whoa, he was thrilled. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Robertson, for phoning. He says, I'd like to talk to you about the tuberculosis outbreak that we got in Alberta. And I said, oh, because it sort of caught me short. And I'm still thinking along the health line. And he says something about a brand on the left hip. And when I had these cancer treatments in Edmonton, they had tattooed my rear end where I was getting the thing. So here I am off talking all about this Cross Cancer Clinic was wonderful. And he says, oh, yes, well, and he's trying to push me somewhere else, and I can't figure. So now he's talking about tuberculosis. Well, that was in Kamloops. That wasn't in Edmonton. Well, this conversation was so convoluted, and the fella was so patient.
Well, now just hang on, because this really gets interesting. First, though, let's get back to the big western sky and life on the range with Bren Hill.
Branded by the land, befriended by the wind. You may never pass this way again. But something in the wind is saying that your time is now, boy. Your daddy calls you a drifter. I call you cowboy.
I still remember how it rained, still hear the whistling wire. I know we really haven't changed since our first Brandon fire. It's such a long, winding road through years of sacrifice. If we knew then, now what do we know? Would we still choose the life? We rode the glory trail, my friend, that leads right straight to God. Still searching everywhere west to find a riding job. You take the Baker Highway home to southeast Oregon. You take it easy all alone, but you are not alone. 400 miles you have to fill, new dreams to carry on. You're just a buckaroo, but still your legacy grows strong. You ride the glory trail, my friend, that leads right straight to God. Still searching everywhere west to find the riding job. Now the cities of the West, they spread like prairie fire. Still it burns deep down in my chest, it is my one desire. To saddle up at break of dawn and ride into the wind. To see the West before it's gone once more with you, my friend. To ride the glory trail again, that leads right straight to God. Still searching everywhere west to find the riding job. To find the riding job. To find the riding job.
Yeah, still a few good riding jobs around in some places. Anyway, now Denny Robertson was talking with the caller that left the message, and he was still thinking it had something to do with his cancer treatments or the experimental work with the tuberculosis virus.
Well, this conversation was so convoluted, and the fella was so patient. Finally, he said the word cattle. Cattle and brand on the left hip, VR. Oh, you're talking about the 5R Ranch brand when we used to have cattle. I finally got tuned in. My word. Well, the conversation went on a bit, and he was so good. He explained about this had been a while previous that they'd had this outbreak, and they've narrowed it down to a VR brand. And there's a few brands like that in BC and quite a few more across Canada. And his job was to research all of this and try and funnel it right down to the individual ranch where this tuberculosis was coming from. And he says, how long has it been since you had cattle? And I says, oh, and I'm thinking quickly because my mind is still mixed with this health thing. And I said, about 7-8 years. Well, it's been more like 15 years. And he says, well, you probably don't have much concern. Now, don't worry about it. I'll get back to you, and extremely patient. And it took about, I would say, 2 weeks, maybe at the most. We get a call back from him, and he says, just to let you know, we've narrowed it down. We found the ranch. Everything's under control. And please don't worry, but if you got any concerns, give me a call. Well, I'll tell you, that has to impress the people.
Well, Denny will wrap this story right up just a little later. But next, it's Baxter Black and the goat that got a ride to Pincher Creek, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan with a little peek at the therapeutic goat. If your group or association is planning a meeting and are on a thrifty budget, check out Virtual Video Baxter. That's me. I'll video a personalized welcome, then furnish several humorous stories to run between your speakers. Signbooks can be used as auction items. We've done rodeos, museums, bull sales, the Conservation Service. Use your imagination. Virtual Video Baxter. Give us a call, 800-654-2550 at baxterblack.com. Goat, the most widely domesticated ruminant in the world, a cantankerous person as in old goat, or an ancient cannon thought to ward off equine disease. Blaine was in Saskatchewan adding to his revolving horse collection when the seller suggested he take a goat along as well. You know, they have a calming effect on horses as well as disease prevention, and I have one right here for only $25. Well, on the trip home to Pincher Creek, Blaine became aware of Billy's strong, some would say unpleasant, odor that only disappeared when he got above 60 kilometers per hour. Well, Billy became king of the barnyard and spent time with his original equine companion, as well as others that required goat therapy. Blaine was pleased with the harmony that Billy lent to the homestead, and if the smell bothered Blaine, he never said. But it's entirely possible that Blaine was olfactorily impaired due to his constant exposure to the infestations and assorted pestilence that occurred in his daily practice of veterinary medicine. However, it became a constant source of inquiry by farmers bringing stock to the clinic, as in, "Ooh-wee, what's that smell, eh?" "It's a goat," Blaine explained. "It's been said they have curative powers." "Well, you're to vet. They'd say you don't believe that, do you?" You could hear the fear in their voices. Soon female goats were added to the menagerie till the mob numbered 27. They would attack a hedge like locusts and strip it bare. Finally, under threat of banishment from the house, Blaine got rid of all the goats except Billy, who continued to reign supreme from his throne atop a round bale feeder in the colt corral. One afternoon, a buyer came by to look at some colts. Blaine led him to the corral. Billy was ensconced on his perch, head peeking through the tubular steel frame. "Ooh-wee," said the buyer, covering his burning eyes and holding his nose. "What is that?" "It's a goat," said Blaine. "Well, it smells dead." Blaine gave a second look. Billy was sitting where he always sat, right on top of the round bale feeder, except his head was at an odd angle where it poked under the steel. On closer examination, there were other indicators of an accidental barnyard suicide, like a balloonish appearance and slip into the hair. "By gosh, you're right," said Blaine, pausing. "I thought that bale was lasting a little longer than usual." This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan. Thanks for listening.
Join us Labor Day weekend for the 68th Annual North Thompson Fall Fair and Rodeo in Barrier, BC, September 2nd to 4th, 2017. With 3 full days of BCRA rodeo, pony chariot and chuck wagon racing, entertainment stage, lawn tractor races, 4-H and livestock competitions, outdoor and indoor entertainment, bingo, amusements, heavy horse pulls and competitions, light horse show, hundreds of entries in the exhibit hall, great food, commercial booths and exhibits, a kids area, and much more. The Cowboy Concert is Sunday night. Get all the details at fallfair-rodeo.com. John Robert Goodman was born in New Brunswick, raised in Bear Lake, BC, and he's lived in Quesnel for about the last 45 years or so. He's won quite a few music awards, including the Caribou Idol Songwriting Competition in 2012, and he appears on a real nice album of songwriters and musicians called Songwriters of British Columbia. And wouldn't this be a nice one to make a few laps around the dance floor with your sweetheart?
I was raised in the hills, and my dad worked at the sawmill. And Mama, she'd be cooking all day long. The first job that I had was piling lumber with my dad. He taught me what was right from what was wrong. Well, I just want to sing my song so that it turns out right, like Alan Jackson on the TV show, like Chris and Hank, George Jones, they've all made the big time. And I just wonder how far a country boy can go. When I got my first guitar, I didn't think I'd get too far. But Daddy, he did help me pick and sing. Pretty soon I got the chance to go play for a dance, and I wouldn't miss this chance for anything. Well, I just want to sing my song so that it turns out right, like Alan Jackson on the TV show, like Chris and Hank, George Jones, they've all made the big time. And I just wonder how far a country boy can go. Rocky road from Bear Lake to Nashville, but Daddy, he did help push me along. He said, a star someday you'll be, and we'll be watching you on TV, and we'll be here to help you sing your songs. 'Cause I just want to sing my song so that it turns out right, like Alan Jackson on the TV show, like Chris and Hank and George Jones, they've all made the big time. And I just wonder how far a country boy can go. Yeah, I just wonder how far a country boy can go.
The news of the rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
As we look towards the fall roundup and the fall calf run, every pound these calves put on means a little bigger payday, and this might not work for everybody, but it's an interesting report from Rod Bain.
Cattle producers, do you have spring-born calves approaching that 100-day mark where they're weaned from their mothers or lactating cows? If you have not done this already, now is a good time to possibly include creep feeding to the calves' diet to boost nutrition.
I think most reason that producers are looking at creep feed is to get a higher weaning weight. And we know that most commercial cow-calf operators are selling those calves at weaning, and so they can see the direct result of that additional weight in the check that they receive from wherever they market their calves.
Travis Mateer of University of Illinois Extension says creep feeding can be employed to calves regardless of season of birth, fall as well as spring. He adds, though, economics can be a con for a producer considering creep feeding.
Depending on the year, whether feed costs and cattle prices match up to make creep feed economical.
He adds creep feeding as a strategy and product depends on the producer, ranging from forage for calves in a paddock ahead of the cows to a supplemental grain mix with ingredients such as oats and barley. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is considering changes to the health of animals regulations for livestock traceability, and that would require all Canadian operators of premises where livestock may be loaded or unloaded from a vehicle to have a valid premises ID number for each site and report the number when receiving livestock. The 5 Canadian provinces with mandatory premises identification are Prince Edward Island, Quebec, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, but all provinces and territories have systems in place to issue PID numbers. Well, did you ever wonder how many calves were born on the ranches of the West this year? Well, in the U.S., about 32.5 million is the number of beef cows, including heifers that have successfully calved, and that's 7% above the count for 2015 at this point. And the ratio of the July beef cow inventory to the January level is the highest since 1993. These numbers, they tell us, confirm that the cow herd is still expanding. Heifer slaughter is up 11% so far in 2017, and the number of heifers on feed was up 11% in the second quarter of this year, suggesting that heifer retention is slowing down. Well, that roast beef special or that interesting stir fry or salad you ordered might arrive right on time, but did you know that the average North American meal travels about 1,500 miles before being consumed on your plate? If you live in Canada in the winter, that might even be further. 70% of food's retail price comes from transportation, storage, and handling, and these miles add up pretty fast. Well, a German company called InFarm is the first company in the world to put vertical farming into a supermarket, to have the food grown right where the consumers are. The company's indoor system uses sensors to monitor the growth of the crops of vegetables, herbs, and fruit using a web-controlled irrigation and fertilization system, and its farms are intentionally situated around high-traffic locations in supermarkets. Well, this summer's wildfires have resulted in some sale dates being changed at the BC Livestock Co-op yards, and the best place to get the information on upcoming sales is at their website, bclivestock.bc.ca, and they still have, as they say, space available for horses and cattle who might require housing during the fires. And you can call the yard to make the arrangements at 250-573-3939. Meanwhile, there are regular cattle sales every Wednesday and 2 horse sales a month at the Innisfail Auction Market. You can get more information at innisfailauctionmarket.com. And if you're bringing yearlings in for fall sales, it's a good idea to call ahead and book them at 1-800-710-3166. And that brings us down to this week's final item. Apparently, the room was full of pregnant women with their husbands. And the instructor at the front said, "Ladies, remember that exercise is good for you. Walking is especially beneficial. It strengthens the pelvic muscles, and it'll make delivery that much easier. Just pace yourself, make plenty of stops, and try to stay on a soft surface like grass or a path. And gentlemen, remember, you're in this together, and it wouldn't hurt you to go walking with her. In fact, that shared experience would be good for both of you." And the room suddenly became pretty quiet as the men absorbed this information. And a few moments later, a man, whose name we won't mention, at the back of the room slowly raised his hand. "Yes," says the instructor. "I was just wondering," he said, "if it would be all right if she carries a golf bag." And that's the Rangeland News. Something I think is pretty special is coming up. Roy Rogers, of course, known and loved by millions as the king of the cowboys and his magnificent golden Palomino trigger. But was Roy really a knowledgeable horseman or just a good-looking actor with great stunt doubles? Well, see what you think. on the Horse Training File when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. You heard it right. You will hear the voice of Roy Rogers in the Irvin Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File coming right up. Now, this guy makes his living shoeing horses, and he also raises Black Angus cattle and good paint horses. Doug Figgs wrote this one about one of the ranches he shoes for.
I listened to his stories as I nailed on the shoes. He had me shoe his horses, but I know he didn't need me to. He liked to ride the saddle broncs when he was young and limber. They put his picture on the cover of Western Horseman, so we could all remember. The old cowboys say he's the right kind. He does things the cowboy way. If there's a job to do, don't you know he'll get it done by the end of the day. And the horse he rides, it'll be a good one. He knows how to treat 'em right. His hands are fine and he takes his time. He ain't looking for a fight, 'cause he's a cowboy's cowboy. He's what a cowboy ought to be. He's a cowboy's cowboy, riding high and living free. Well, he don't ride that much these days, but back there in his prime, he could ride a day away just wondering at God's design. A cowboy, 'cause that's what he is. It sure ain't for what it pays. And when you're called a cowboy by what you own, there ain't no higher praise. And he's a cowboy's cowboy. He's what a cowboy ought to be. He's a cowboy's cowboy, riding high and living free. What makes a man other places he's been, and all the things he's done? Well, I guess he learned more from the times he lost than he did from the times he won. And he's a cowboy's cowboy. He's what a cowboy ought to be. He's a cowboy's cowboy, riding high and living free. He's a cowboy's cowboy. He's what a cowboy needs to be. He's a cowboy's cowboy, riding high and living free. Yeah, he's a cowboy's cowboy.
The 17th annual Spirit of the West Cruise will be something unforgettable. My wife Billy and I will be hosting a big group of ranchers, farmers, horse and cattle folks, and Spirit of the West listeners for a trip I know many of you have had on your bucket list for a long time. September 16th, 2018, we will sail out of Quebec City and cruise Canada's maritime provinces in all the glory of the fall colors, including stops in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, Sydney and Halifax, Nova Scotia, St. John, New Brunswick and the Bay of Fundy, Bar Harbor, Maine, Boston, Portland, Maine, and Cape Liberty, New Jersey, with an optional stay in New York City. Now, just for the Spirit of the West group, we have a tour of a cattle operation in Nova Scotia. We'll have all our great Western music concerts and sing-alongs, and we'll be swapping lots of ranching stories. And we'll have a lot of special activities just for our group. You'll find more details on the cruise section of our website at hugh-mclennan.com, and on our cruise Facebook page, and you can always call the toll-free number 1-800-530-0131.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
Suit up for summer at Urban Tack and Western Wear. No, I'm not talking boots for the beach, although that would be interesting. I'm talking real summer stuff like sunglasses, sandals, and flip-flops, toys for the kids for those long summer road trips. You'll be surprised what you'll find at Urban's. Jewelry, purses, dishes, collectibles. Hey, all I can say is it's a whole lot of fun. Shopping Urban Tack and Western Wear off exit 305, Highway 2 by Crossfield, open 7 days a week. Roy Rogers was about 71 years old when he did this interview I found just a little while ago, and he was so sharp and so interesting, and during the interview, he had some savvy horse training advice that I thought we'd share with you, and he starts out by talking about his beloved Trigger.
The greatest horse that ever came along. I got him when I made my first picture. He was 4 years old, and before that, just the fall preceding that, the first time he was ever in a picture was Olivia de Havilland rode him in Sherwood Forest in that picture she made with Errol Flynn. Mm-hmm. And I made my first picture with him in January 1938, and we made around 90 of our features and 101 of the half-hour TV shows plus appearances. And he was like an iron horse, and he just if there's a heaven for horses, that's where Trigger is. He was something else. He was sharp, and you show him a few times, and he'd just do it. It's on cue, you know. A horse has two sets of brains, one for each eye, and a lot of people don't know that or realize that, but you've probably heard the saying, never mount a horse from the right side. That's because you saddle him and do everything from the left side, and most people do. And if you go on the other side, you're a stranger. And I could prove it by Trigger. I could work on the left side where you always mount the horse from the left side, and I'd give him the cues to go through the things, and he'd go through everything. I'd go on the other side and give him the same cues, and he'd just stand there as if I wasn't there. You can balance them going up the same way you turn a horse to the left several times and never turn him to the right. You can't get him to turn to the right. You have to train him to do that. Yeah.
Roy Rogers, one of the best horsemen to ever appear in a Western movie. He was absolutely a natural and so athletic. And for Urban Saddles and Western Wear, that's our special horse training file. Something else that's special, and too bad they didn't have this in Trigger's day. Our horses really enjoy that daily feed of Hoffman's Horse Ration. You can find out more at hoffmanshorseration.com. Now, just before we get back to the wrap-up of Denny Robertson's story about the TB mix-up, here's another example of Gary Felgard's songwriting talent called If the Cowboy Goes Away.
If the cowboy goes away, who will ride the lonely places? Who will nurse the tortured ranges? Who will gather in the stray? If the cowboy disappears, who will protect the sweet grass prairie and the high wild sanctuary? If the cowboy goes away, there are still some more vaqueros down in Mexico with tales of California so long ago. That open range is gone like the buffalo. So they sit and watch the sunset on those desert hills. That there are still some old vaqueros, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. If the cowboy goes away, who'll be up there riding fences? Who will still have common senses if the cowboy goes away. They say the cowboy will be one brief page of history. Why anyone would say that is a mystery. When heroes ride away, there's a legacy. But if somewhere on the borderline the story ends, all that we can say, boys, is remember when, oh, remember when. If the cowboy goes away, who will ride the lonely places? Who will nurse the tortured ranges? Who will gather in the stray? If the cowboy disappears, who will protect the sweet grass prairie and the high wild sanctuary? If the cowboy goes away.
Now, just to recap, my pal Denny Robertson had taken successful cancer treatments at the Cross Cancer Clinic in Edmonton a few years ago, and he underwent kind of an experimental treatment using a strain of tuberculosis virus in Kamloops. And a little while ago, he got a phone call from Alberta that really had him concerned until he finally figured out that the caller was referring to bovine tuberculosis, not Denny's condition.
And he says, well, you probably don't have much concern. Now, don't worry about it. I'll get back to you, and extremely patient. And it took about, I would say, 2 weeks, maybe at the most. We get a call back from him, and he says, just to let you know, we've narrowed it down. We've found the ranch. Everything's under control. And please don't worry, but if you got any concerns, give me a call. Well, I'll tell you, that has to impress the people. Mm-hmm. Impressed me, and it should impress the cattle industry, because it was just phenomenal, and the fellow was great. I wish I had his name. I'd like to thank him, because he did a good job, and we got a good laugh out of the whole program, too.
Once you kind of got on the right track.
Oh, boy.
It's not the tattoo on my hip, and it's not my tuberculosis.
It's on the cattle that I haven't had for 15 years.
Yeah. I don't think we even had to be putting in those CFIA radio frequency ear tags back when you had your cattle.
No, we didn't.
We didn't. You know, that was after you got rid of all your cattle.
But he dug into that.
But they could still research it just from your registered brand.
He did, because we've kept it registered.
Yeah,
it's still registered, and I think that was probably the key to it.
Yeah.
Then he went through the registry.
It's still in the registry and still in the systems. So.
Yeah, and he followed it right down to the very nth degree. And that's impressive, and I think all cattlemen should be proud of the group.
Yeah.
Works fine.
Oh, well, that's...
Still to come, our classic Song of the West and a real nice piece of cowboy poetry when The Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to The Spirit of the West. Time for another classic Western song, and this is one that's been sung around a few campfires and on a few trail drives probably since about 1929. It was recorded by a guy by the name of Mark Williams, the cowboy crooner in Dallas, Texas, in October of 1929. And Charles Baker, as the Wyoming cowboy, recorded it on August 15th, 1932. And a couple of decades later, the fine country singer Rose Maddox recorded a version of this song, but she changed the words quite a bit. Now, there was a song with a title very similar to the one we're looking at today. It appeared in a Roy Rogers movie called Riding Down the Canyon in 1947, and Pat Brady soloed on it with the Sons of the Pioneers. That one was called Curly Joe from Idaho. But this one, much earlier, is simply called Curly Joe. And I have not been able to find out much about it. I don't know who wrote it, but there's no doubt the guy in the song was a top hand. He was never bucked off until he met the white rose of the plains. Curly Joe, done here by R.W. Hampton.
1 mile below Blue Canyon on a lonely Pinon Trail, near the little town of Sancto, nestled in a quiet dale, is the grave of a young cowboy whose name is now unknown, save by a few frontiersmen who call this spot their own. He was as fine a rider as ever forked a steed. He was brave and kind and generous, he never did a dirty deed. Curly Joe's the name he went by, was enough for one to know if he ever had another, so they called him Curly Joe. 3 miles from Sancto village lived an ex-grandee of Spain, and his daughter Juan Frienza, called the White Rose of the Plains. Curly loved this high-born lassie since that time so long ago, when he found her on the mountain, lost and blinded by the snow. Quite coquettish was Frienza to the woman's foolish trait that had blasted a many a manhood like the harsh creed of fate. When pressed in earnest language, not flowery but sincere, in answer to his question, she smiled and shed a tear. Dear Curly Joe, amigo, quite wearisome and woe, your sister, sir, forever, but your wife, no, never Joe. Not another word was spoken. In a week, poor Joe was dead, killed by a pitching bronco, or at least that's what they said. For many a year, the tombstone that marked the cowboy's grave, in quaint and curious language, this pathetic warning gave. Never hope to win the daughter of the boss who owns the brand. I tried it and changed ranges to a far and better land.
Quite a story, isn't it? Well, poet Sam DeLue was very well received at the Kamloops Cowboy Festival a few years ago, and here she is in our Cowboy Poetry Spotlight with one called Crossroads.
The cowboy was living his last days. His aged body was tuckered out. He'd ridden more miles than he could count, understood what life was all about. He's dog-tired, exhausted, and worn out, situated his drained body back, stretched out upon his canvas bedroll, rested his head on his trail-worn cack. The chilly night air carried him back through early years he'd ridden on earth. Separately, he remembered them all, the horses he bred and raised from birth. The best was that agile Morgan mare, standing 14 and a half hands tall, quick as a darting prairie lizard, catty as a cougar at nightfall. Bareback they swam the old Snake River to cut off cattle running hell-bent. Water got deep, he slid from her back while she pulled him against the current. She dragged him up the slippery bank, knelt down as he shimmied back aboard. Racing the wind, they outran the stock. Escapees returned as warm rains poured. Repeatedly the mare saw dangers before the young boy did recognize those badger holes or the sunning snakes in a curled-up sagebrush branch disguise. The old cowboy awoke from his sleep. His pain was gone and his mind was clear. The air around him smelled of springtime, colors vibrant for that time of year. Through freshly painted gates he ambled, past white corrals, not old, gray, or chewed. Curious to check nearby horses, stopped short. questioning just what he viewed. There she stood, that little Morgan mare, with wide-set eyes and that left-cropped ear. She nickered when he slowly approached, then knelt down as he fought back that tear. He knew horses would go to heaven, certainly the good ones that he rode. He told his kids this was his belief, what he'd expect at heaven's crossroad. Without using words, they now could talk of bygone days they were together, when racing the wind, swimming the snake, unencumbered and free of leather. The mare nuzzled the old cowhand's chest. She knew this man when he was a lad. The little Morgan mare was Bonnie. Heaven's newest cowboy was my dad. I've learned horses will be in heaven, especially the good ones that we rode. I'll spend my time at those white corrals when I show up at heaven's crossroad.
Well, thank you so much for making the ride this week. Sure hope you can join us right here next week at the same time. And thanks again to our great support crew. That's Mark and Kathy McMillan at Meadow Springs Guest Ranch. If you happen to be looking for tractor parts, any make, any year, check out what Mark can find for you on his website, bctractorparts.com. Some fine reading in the latest issue of Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine. I put a story in there about a guy I used to ride with quite a bit, and met up with him at a branding again this spring. And you'll find out who this guy is in that story. Subscribe online at cowboycountrymagazine.com or call them at 1-800-943-7336. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.